There we go. Thank you, Karen, if that was you. All right, well, thank you all for coming today. This is the first meeting of the El Camino Real Specific Plan Task Force. We have an agenda today, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to help us go through the agenda as well as all the different items on that agenda. So just give me 1 second and I will do that. All right, so here's our meeting today. And here is our agenda for today. If at any time you can't hear me, just let me know. If I start hearing noise, I may mute you if you're not already muted. So I'm just giving you that heads up, and then you can unmute yourself again. So again, this is the agenda for June 7th. So the first thing we need to do is call this meeting to order. Council member, or actually Deputy Mayor Mosca, is technically our chair under the resolution, and so I will let him be chair.
All right, well, I'll call this meeting of the ECR Encinitas El Camino Real Task Force to order, our first meeting, June 7th, 2022. Do we want to have a roll call?
Yes. Okay, so Deputy Mayor.
Present.
Susan Sharon.
Hello, my name is Susan Sherrod, and I am a planning commissioner with the city of Encinitas. And I am also a licensed architect and hold a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Arts in Architecture, as well as a Master of Arts in Industrial and Technical Studies. I have about 40 years of experience currently.
All right. And
thank you, Susan.
Michael von Neumann.
Present.
And then I have Chris Calkins.
Here.
Byron Day, I'm gonna mispronounce your last name.
I'll help you out. It's D article for future reference, and I am here.
All right, thank you. Ron Dodge.
Present.
I'm gonna go with George Capiello.
Present.
Sherry Yardley. Let's see everybody. And then I don't see Sherry Yardley, and then Nikki Cometa. Also don't see Nikki Cometa. All right.
All right, well, now that we have our roll call done, we'll move to the agenda 3A, which is task force member introductions, roles, and responsibilities. I'll start off and then I'll just tag somebody else who can go with their introduction. So my name is Joe Mosca, Deputy Mayor of the City of Encinitas and member of this task force until the end of the year. El Camino Real has been something something that's really important to our city and something that's important to me. I've spent some time focusing on El Camino Real and trying to improve and invest in El Camino Real over the last 6 years that I've been on the city council. My hope is that with the specific plan, we're able to encapsulate the vision for this corridor, the community's vision for this corridor in our planning documents, and allow us to start to really reach some of the goals that we have for improvement of this corridor and invest in the corridor. Since it is such an important corridor, we want to make sure that it gets the attention that it deserves. So I will tag the next person to do introductions, which is the person right under me in the boxes here, Michael von Neumann.
Hello. Yes, my name is Michael von Neumann. I am a resident of New Encinitas. I live over on North Willow Spring. I'm currently the chair of the Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission here in Encinitas. And since about 2014, I've become very interested and active in city issues regarding improving mobility for all types of transportation. And I'm happy to be on this committee. Thank you.
Why don't we call in Byron next?
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Mosca. My name's Byron DeOracle. I am the Consulting Director of Entitlement Planning and Communications for TRC Retail. We are the owner of Encinitas Village and Camino Village Plaza in the heart of the El Camino Real corridor. Very much appreciate being asked to participate in this task force. Encinitas has been a part of my life since I was probably about 10 years old when my parents rented a house on Neptune for the summer for about 6 or 7 straight years. So I have fond memories of Encinitas. I'm happy to participate in this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
I'm Chris Calkins. I'm president of Carltus Company, and we're the majority partner of the Encinitas Ranch Town Center and Plaza entities. I've been working with the Ecke family. I'm an attorney by practice, by education. I've been working with the Ecke family since the mid '80s and was responsible for the design and plan for the Encinitas Ranch. So.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. George?
Get off mute. Yeah. My name is George Capiello. I'm a homeowner in Village Park area right off Mountain Vista and Wandering. I've lived in Village Park for about 15 years. My kids are still in school. I am a practicing attorney. I'm a trial litigation attorney, mostly do insurance bad faith litigation on the plaintiff side. I represent policy owners. I'm really excited to be asked to be a part of this task force, mainly because I live here and use that corridor, and that's the only way to get in and out of my house to get to places, and that's where my kids spend time, and where my neighbors and my community utilizes all the time. So I'm happy to be a voice of my neighborhood at the least, as well as the larger neighborhood.
Thank you, George, for getting involved. Ron? Ron, you're on mute.
You know, I've watched people do that at many of the session and thought I wouldn't do it. Okay, my name's Ron Dodge. I'm a 37-year resident of Encinitas. I lived in the same house in the Fieldstone development just behind the professional buildings on the east side of El Camino Real in Ardenview. I've been fairly active in the city activity. And I was a member of the Coastal Mobility and Livability working group back about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And I was actually a participant and joined in with the survey of El Camino Real that we did with Dan Burden back in June of 2017. He had a number of interesting and I think very valuable comments about the livability and workability of the El Camino corridor. I'm very interested in the entire city, particularly since I've retired, and in particular the El Camino Real corridor and our environments here. So background, yes, I am retired. I did that about 8 years ago. And I was by education engineer, and the last half of my career was business development and marketing for a major aerospace company.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you for being involved. Just to note, there's a little bit of an issue with your audio there, just so that we have clean copies in the future. We did hear everything that you said, but there was just a little echo in the background there. Just to make you aware. Susan, you had introduced yourself already. Did you want to say anything else?
Well, I would like to add, in addition to my planning commissioner role and licensure and architecture, that I have lived in the new Encinitas area for about 8 years and have served for about 2 years on the planning commission. And I do traverse the El Camino Real corridor frequently, and so I'm quite familiar with it. But also, I think that having reviewed, and I attended the first workshop, and having reviewed all of the comments that have come back, I feel fairly well informed on what our community is looking for.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Sherry, great event on Saturday with the wine festival. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm from the Encinitas Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here representing our businesses along the El Camino Real. I did want to note too that I was here on time. It's just that I wasn't let in as a panelist. So I'm sitting there going, here, 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 and nobody can hear me.
Sorry about that, Sherry.
That's okay.
We do appreciate your engagement and your participation. Thank you. And then we have Nikki, but I don't see Nikki on the phone or in one of the boxes. So if Nikki's with us, please do chime in. If not, Jennifer, should I hand this back to you in terms of what your expectations are with regard to roles and responsibilities?
Sure. Ron, did you have a question real quick before we get started?
Not so much a question, but rather a statement towards involvement. I was fairly closely involved with our interactive with the recent paving and restriping of El Camino Real, and in fairly frequent contact and communication with the city staff about ideas and some additions to those markings to make it a little bit safer for pedestrians and bicyclists and motorists alike. And I look forward to contributing further. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Ron.
All right, with that, I just wanted to give a little bit more background into how the task force was formed, and then we'll go over roles and responsibilities, and then get into bring everybody up to the same speed as far as what we've done so far with the task force, with the El Camino Real specific plan project, because I know that some of you have participated. City Council has received an update back in January about the status, and I don't know how much everybody has heard about the project. So I just want to make sure everybody starts off on the same foot. So with that, the task force was formed by City Council on May 11th and identified what the members would be and what they would look like. And so that's what you see on the screen. So thank you all for your participation. The next I want to talk about is the roles and responsibilities. This again is part of the resolution. I know that Melinda in our office had sent everybody, I think, a copy of the resolution when she reached out so that everybody understood what the purpose of the task force was. But just so we could go over it and also share with the public that is watching right now. So the roles, again, City Council member will be the chair. The vice chair is the planning commissioner. We will hold meetings in accordance with the Brown Act. So that means that we'll be posting the agendas 72 hours in advance. There's also requirements as far as communications. So just be aware. I'll send this link to everybody. It just kind of talks about what the limitations are with communications amongst members. All meetings are open to the public, and we will have public comment. That's part of the agenda today as well, as public to allow time for public comment. The responsibilities for the task force is to be an advisory committee to the City Council for the preparation of this draft specific plan. And I'll give you a background on where we are with the project, what we see as the next steps, and what those different components are going to be for your participation and when we'll potentially be having meetings. It won't be a regularly scheduled meeting per se, because it's going to depend on some milestones that need to be met with the project itself. So then we can meet as long as they meet their milestones, our consultant. So the task force will review and guide the development of the specific plan, which includes some various tasks, which are to review the existing conditions and the work completed to date. And again, all that information is on our website, and I'll do a high-level review of it. But if you wanted to get into a little bit more detail, everything is on our website, including the noted Dan Burden's review of the corridor back in 2017. So we've put past information as well as the current plan project research. Also review and comment on the goals, objectives, and policies for the plan. These have not been developed. These would be something that you will be reviewing within the next year. And then also to review and comment on the land use, circulation, and development and design standards. So that is the purpose of the specific plan. Some of you may have participated in other specific plan developments in other communities or even our community when the Encinitas Ranch was developed. Or in any other reviews. So same kind of process. It's going to be a little different, and we can talk a little bit more about that when we get into more of the details at a future meeting. So as far as financial interest, the El Camino Real Task Force shall perform solely an advisory function. So their conclusions and any recommendations are not required to be considered by the Planning Commission or the City Council before the action is taken. It's purely for advisory. And the task force does not have any decision-making authority, so they're not, so any financial interests are not in conflict. So we just wanted to make sure that's clear. So with that, I will jump into the El Camino Real specific plan project and where we are, if that's all right.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, or your electronic hand, or your actual real hand, so I can see you and recognize you. But feel free to jump in at any time. If any of the information that's being presented, you have questions on or just comments on, please feel free to ask the questions in real time so that you don't forget them and we get them answered.
All right. So with that, the El Camino Real specific plan. So here on the screen, you see an overview of the boundaries that we are looking at. We have recently modified this map and we'll be including the mobile home park into the plan. But we can talk more about that. That's currently thought of as continuing to be a mobile home park, not to look at it and changing any of the zoning. But potentially into the way long future that maybe there is a housing component to that same site that may not be mobile homes, and to allow that potential. So the project background.
Jennifer, what about Sprouts? If you go back there, how come we included the kind of, for the lack of a better term or name for this, we included the LA Fitness kind of site, but we didn't include the one on the western portion. How come that wasn't included?
Sprouts should be right here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at, all right. I'm looking at this as this is south, and that's all right. All right.
The Sprouts should be, or sorry, Sprouts, right? Sprouts, Trader Joe's.
You're right.
BMW.
I was looking at the top portion as it was the southern portion, and the other side was the northern portion. All right, perfect.
Okay. So it first started, the idea of the El Camino Real specific plan in the 2013-21 housing element update. It was part of the goals and programs to diversify housing in Encinitas. It did get continued on into the 2021-29 housing element. So that is part of the reason why we are looking at the El Camino Real corridor and identifying a specific plan. This has also been on City Council's radar and discussed in the past to do a specific plan. And when HCD had some funding available, the local early action planning grant program, we decided this is a good time to apply for funds to assist us with the development of this corridor specific plan. With HCD, there are certain requirements, and of course, the idea being that we wanted to look at the potential of the corridor to provide housing. But there's other aspects of the corridor that we wanted to look at for a specific plan to basically create one cohesive area in the community. So we did also do a number of community surveys to better understand the community's needs and values before we kicked off the project. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So here is the project process. We are a little farther than where I've identified. We have not identified any land use alternatives. We're actually going to kind of change that word and make it more of like design alternatives. And so we are getting ready to do workshop number 2, as well as the land use alternatives at that same meeting. We also will be talking about the vision for the corridor. This has not been identified yet. So those are all going to be basically combined together. And then from our workshop number 2, we will be presenting a preferred land use alternative, or basically the findings of the workshop with the preferred land use alternative. And that's when our next milestone is, and that's when we will next have a task force meeting. So we would be looking to have that at the end of July, so in a month from now. So again, we did do an early outreach survey before we kicked off the project. And this survey received a lot of results. This information is available on the project website, and you can look at the details as far as what the interests were from the different community members that did participate in the survey. They looked at a number of different aspects. And the survey respondents mostly indicated that they visit the corridor for grocery and retail shopping. Many travel through the corridor to get to their homes, and they visit for restaurant and coffee type uses. They also identified that they want to see more enhanced mobility, safety for all the transportation modes that are along the corridor, as well as enhanced open space, parks, trails, and landscaping. So we did kick off the project in July of 2021, so almost a year ago now. And we've done a workshop since then. And we've also done some background information. So the first was opportunities and constraints memo. And this memorandum was for the entire corridor, and it consolidated the information regarding the existing project area conditions, as far as land use, zoning, mobility, urban design, economics, and also the utilities. And then also identified opportunities for improvement. Again, all documents are on the project website. So the memorandum identified the land use and zoning regulations that are currently in place, which is, as we all know, a commercial only car-oriented development that's seen in the corridor today. And then it also has led to limited landscaping and park and recreation facilities. And then there's also a clear transition in the corridor when some of the regulations did change with the city's adoption of the Encinitas Ranch and Home Depot specific plan areas. The memo also looked at mobility, and as we all know, there's long blocks. There's not many bus stop amenities. There's also a lot of conflicts between cars and other modes of transportation that we see all along the corridor. There is standard pedestrian and bike connections. We have seen some changes with the new striping that has come in. But we still have some work to do as far as transition between our existing sites to help us also reduce conflicts. Also, there are a lot of parking that rarely reaches full capacity. We did do parking study that is part of the memo that was done on a weekday and a weekend. Obviously, it's not going to be a Thanksgiving timeframe when we did the counts. But it was a typical weekend and typical weekday. In here that you see on the map, you can see kind of what that parking occupancy looked like. And again, it's more detailed within the memo if you're curious to see what the details were. The consultants also looked at urban design and looked at opportunities and constraints along those. It's very eclectic as far as the architectural style, but there isn't one, common sense of place. There's not a lot of street presence as well. All of the orientations are all inward facing, and there's no connectivity between the centers, and that causes most of that conflicts with our access points to the different centers. And then as far as economics, they looked at, the different shopping centers. What are the different providers within those shopping centers? We do see a high vacancy for offices, and there are some underutilized spaces. I would say that majority of the spaces are used compared to maybe other retail centers in other communities that may have a lot more retail in their community, but there are still some vacancies. And then there's also opportunities for more employers, and then also some startup or incubator space. Also, as far as utilities, we've seen this before, but most of our utilities in the corridor are visible, and they do, in many cases, obstruct access, sidewalk access, and there may be some need for capacity upgrades with any future development. So we did hold a public workshop in November. We presented this information to them. I don't know how many of you were able to participate in that meeting, but we did have around 50 participants from the public, and in an open house style, everybody participated in different ways. But we wanted to get their feedback regarding areas that they find to be assets, any areas of issues, and other opportunities. So we also provided a virtual workshop format, and the different topics that we had stationed at the in-person workshop were available in the virtual format as well. So the different topics were around land use, urban design, mobility, economics, and vision. So similar to the opportunities and constraints that were reviewed. So this is just to summarize what common themes there were of similar opinions. So a lot of opinions that were similar around wanting a pedestrian and bike friendly environment, that there was a need for traffic improvements. Also, we need to look at vehicle access and parking, the need for landscaping. They like to see retaining the variety of uses and the unique small businesses and different offices that are allowed, and maybe allow more mixed development types within strategic locations. So differing opinions that were highlighted were that some wanted a greater range in land use height limitations, and then some wanted to retain the existing height limitation along the corridor or within the city as a whole. Public transportation, we do have a bus service in the street right now, but to have a trolley or a shuttle service, and then some believed that that was not going to be feasible for the area. And then also housing, some wanted to look at the variety of housing options, especially missing middle and affordable and senior housing. And then the concern being that adding additional housing would cause more congestion within the corridor. Another event that occurred was on December 7th. There was a roundtable discussion that was open to the public, and the discussion topics included the topics that you see here. So the roundtable discussion was with developers to understand their perspective on the corridor, the market, development barriers within the corridor, and what makes the corridor attractive investment opportunity with the feasibility to add housing. And 7 developers participated within the discussions, and we had about 15 members of the community that attended that discussion. Overall comments included that standalone retail is failing. The corridor needs to be more bikeable and walkable to accommodate the density And that increased density was looking at 40 to 60 DUs per acre. The need for increased building heights to allow that density. Also to have flexibility within our zoning regulations, such as overlays, and letting the market dictate the use itself. That horizontal mixed use is preferred versus vertical. So horizontal being maybe the commercial use is in front and the residential is behind, versus commercial on the bottom and then residential above. Municipal code is outdated with conditional use permits required for specific uses, was the other comment. So again, we are moving along in the process and we are looking forward to workshop number 2. So that is going to be held on June 20th. The notices have gone out last week. It will be at
Jennifer, can we pause for 1 second?
Sure.
Because that was a lot of information. And I
Sure.
want to let the group kind of just have a moment to let that kind of percolate and see if they have any questions or comments on what was just presented. Anybody?
Yes, this is Michael.
Michael?
Yes. One question I had on one of the slides that showed respondents to the survey and with the numbers of them in this field and planning and field and professional planners, et cetera, was the number of respondents to the survey considered, valid, useful, and a good representation of people's opinions and thoughts?
So I think what you're getting at is whether it was statistically relevant.
There you go. That's
so in planning, in the planning world, we actually do not require surveys to be statistically relevant. We're looking at it to provide information and feedback that we provide then the consultants as well as the decision makers about what we heard from those that are participating. Does that make sense? So
yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, so it may not be a representation of 70% of Encinitas residents or new Encinitas residents.
Jennifer, an important part of this this exercise, this project, is the visioning, coming up with a vision for the corridor and ensuring that that vision is really the community's vision, and that we're then aligning all the tools to be able to reach that vision in the future. So it looks like we're still kind of in the mode of collecting community input. What do you envision? When do we actually start to put that vision together? And just kind of from a logistics nuts and bolts, how are we going to do that? I know for the city council and other organizations that I've belonged to, the governing board comes together and kind of just hammers out what our values are and puts together a vision for the organization. How are we going to do that for this?
Sure. So we started looking at the vision of what the community envisions during that first workshop and for the corridor. And that's where a lot of the information about the uses that are going to be along the corridor and how do we envision those uses playing out is part of workshop number 2. So in workshop number 2, the reason why we're, instead of saying it's land use alternatives, we're going to talk about design aspects along the corridor, focusing mostly on what's happening on the sites themselves or what could potentially happen on the sites themselves. And then also begin to talk about the corridor as a whole, what that would have to look like to blend in with those types of uses and that design of those uses on the site. So that's going to give more of that physical vision of the corridor. And then we're going to talk about what the broader vision was that we got from the workshop number 1.
So sometime after workshop 2, after we've collected more information on all different phases or parts of the potential vision, that would be presented, the consultants would present it, and we would have an opportunity as a group and as a community to kind of look at what we've come up with in terms of the vision and have some input into that?
Yes.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's move on to workshop 2.
So workshop number 2 is again on June
Yes.
12th.
I do have some questions.
Oh,
Yes,
Susan?
I had my
Susan.
hand up, but I don't know if you could see it.
Shout out, because like I can't see it
Sorry.
because we have the presentation up, I can't see sometimes the hands.
there we go. Now I see that hand.
Okay, so yes, what I'm most curious about is I would imagine that as far as I looked at the information, that zoning is going to be a primary concern, that we may be making recommendations for modifying zoning. Would that be correct?
That would be correct. That's part of the specific plan itself. They would create design and development standards for the corridor.
Okay, then is it appropriate at this point for me to express some things that I heard from people at the workshop and read about on the website, and what I think might address some of their wishes?
You can, but I think that after workshop 2, that may be best when we're actually talking about what happens at workshop 2, where we actually are getting more into those details that are more design and development standard related.
Okay, so the things that I've been seeing from the feedback that we got so far is that people want to basically keep a small town feel. People want to have a lot of green in their city, and some of the things they think are that they are worried that if housing is added, that it would add more congestion. So I think that we need to take a look at this in terms of zoning in a way that does those things, but is maybe a little more radical. I think we need to think big. I don't think we want to have little tiny solutions here and there. I think we really look at this entire corridor. And when I looked at it, because I'm used to using a lot of technical tools in my work, I noticed that there's actually about a 200-foot elevation drop from about Encinitas and El Camino Real down to Lucadia and El Camino Real. And to me, that says opportunity, because when you have that big of a change in elevation over a public right-of-way, which is owned by the city and managed by the city, it tells me that we have the ability to traverse with an overpass type solution that adds green at the same time as perhaps addressing some of our affordable housing needs. That's a very, very general feedback that I'm giving. It's not specific, because the people who work on these kinds of actual specifics would spend hours on it, I'm sure. But connecting up the green end, which I see as the Lucadia end, has, the green area next to Home Depot and the golf course area, and then the other end, the closest green areas, which are probably by Oak Crest, the rec center, the park, and in between a little bit by Target, there is some green space. Connecting those up in ways that provide opportunities to still maintain the commercial successes, and flexible zoning, I think, is extremely important. I love that I saw that as one of the goals, because we don't know what our future is going to be. We could not have predicted COVID, for example. The pandemic and working from home has become a thing. So I think flexibility in how we make recommendations is really critical.
Thank you, Susan. Ron?
Just reflecting on some things I've heard in discussions earlier in this process. is this going to be, I understand this will likely be subject to a vote under Prop A. Is that indeed the case?
That is correct.
Okay,
If the project proposes to modify the density or change the land use, it does require a Prop A vote.
okay. So going from straight retail, commercial to mixed use would be one of those changes.
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess we have to bear in mind the possibilities or probabilities of what might happen with a plan that that comes together, and with a Prop A vote, and how any plan might fare with the Prop A vote.
Thank you, Ron. Fair point. I mean, I think that housing is one element of what we're doing here. But I would say that for me, the conversation of specific plan really kind of came about as we were investing in this corridor, and we're thinking about, and Ron, you were one of the residents, one of the folks that was really kind of impressing upon us how the roadway really is unsafe for people to kind of walk and ride their cycle in that area, and really kind of looking at it holistically and thinking, you know, it really does need additional planning and investment. And as we were investing, a lot of my colleagues were saying, what's the vision? What are we doing here? You know, there's a lot of things that people are talking about, from gathering spaces, connectivity between the centers, parking issues. And so this was really kind of, for me, an outgrowth of how do we basically take it a step further in investing in this corridor? What's going to guide our investments in the future? Certainly, you know, housing is one element of it, but there's a lot of other things that New Encinitas folks and the entire city have been asking for: more green space, more open space, more gathering space, more connectivity between the centers, and opportunities to really kind of meet their neighbors and be out and about in these areas. And so I think those are also elements that I hope that we're able to kind of really think about, and it's not just something that we're, you know, focused on housing, because it's much greater than that. Let's go one more time around, and then we'll go on to the next agenda item. Susan?
Yeah, one of the main concerns I have is that we want people in town to be unified in their response to our suggestions. And the way to do that is to give them what they're asking for. And yet, as the conclusions were pointing out, we have a little bit of a division in what people want in town. With some people pro having more housing, some people really against it. But I think as long as we do things in a way that provides the things everybody wants more green, everybody wants more safety. And we want to give them that recommendation of ways that we see to have that safety. I think an overlay zone where we would elevate above the existing right-of-way some of the infrastructure and housing and so on would give them a lot of safety, because they wouldn't be down at that street level with all those multiple driveways that they have right now in El Camino Real. I know when I ride my bike down from my house, let's say, you know, down El Camino Real from Encinitas down to Lucadia practically, I don't even know how many driveways there are, but a lot. And every time I'm passing them, I'm thinking to myself, I'm glad I'm wearing my helmet. I'm glad I'm a good bike rider. But at the same time, people can, look down for a second, and it only takes a second for a car to make a mistake. So if we could get that pedestrian way elevated above it, or if we could have even maybe a lift that lifts the bike up and then you ride above it, and then we're riding through parkland. I think people would really love that idea. And I don't know what our budget is. That is a question I also had, is what kind of budget, what kind of funding can we realistically have for the city infrastructure part of it? And I really think that independent developers, I kind of think of it like a chance to make a boulder bolder, if you know what I mean. If you've ever been to Boulder, Colorado and seen how their interactive community area is, it's really a lovely thing with, and they have, you know, entertainment, and they have music, and, you know, they have kid areas where kids can climb and stuff. And it's really a fun place to go. I sort of think of it, if we had something elevated above the roadway, that it would be kind of like a Boulder in a way. We would be an even better Boulder in a way. We have that opportunity. We have this wonderful opportunity to envision, to really be visionary with what we think.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. Michael?
Yes, I think one of the biggest challenges to this corridor, and I think really needs to be addressed and at least acknowledged, is that a vast majority of the traffic on this corridor at certain times of the day is not going there to shop or do anything. They're using it as a commuter throughway to get to the freeway. And I just think it's important to be able to try to figure out how much of that traffic is people just going through. And then we also have to decide with whatever plans that anything that's done on this corridor is going to increase congestion. I mean, it's just going to happen until we have flying cars. But the fact that so many people use this as a throughway to the freeway, which is what I say often, we really have to take that into account. And I don't think we can plan just within the city itself, because, you know, we're affected by Carlsbad, La Costa, San Marcos, San Leo Hills, and everything like that. People are using it as a major way to go north-south. And it just has to be remembered. I don't know if there's some way of trying to figure out where, you know, how much of that traffic is through traffic and how much isn't, but they will continue to have an impact.
Right, and that's what your commission's going to be engaged in with the city, which is the circulation element. And so you're certainly going to have some input into that in the future, and we'll probably, hopefully, through this task force, we'll look at some of that data as well, and in the planning address some of it as well, because we certainly want to move people that are coming from the east going west. We want to move them further west to the 5 freeway. So let's move on to
and north and south. And also, I think we should like call Elon Musk up and get him to build a tunnel under there.
All right. So we have a tunnel. We have a roadway above the roadway. Do we have anything else? No, joking. Ron, one last comment, and let's move to the next item.
Okay. Quickly, you know, I'm going back to Michael's point about the traffic passing through. It's been my contention every time that I speak to somebody, whether it's at council or you know, elsewhere in the city. We are a pass-through city. We stand between the conduit of I-5 and tens of thousands of residents to the east and the northeast. So that's a constant. We need to keep that in mind. I believe there's about 42 driveways between Encinitas Boulevard and Leucadia. Yes, I did count them. I just can't remember the number. It's part of that whole striping and safety survey thing. And then last but not least, going back to the Prop A, even if it's just commercial changes in zoning, would it have to go to a vote of the populace, or is it only if there's housing involved?
No, it is change in density or uses, the land use itself. So there are certain triggers for commercial land use as well.
Okay, so depending on what comes up, then it could or could not be a trigger. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Good comments. Thank you, Ron. Let's move to the next item, which is the workshop number 2.
Sure. Workshop number 2, again, is June 20th at 6 o'clock, Community and Senior Center. And this is going to be the opportunity for the community, as well as you all. I hope you can participate. There'll be a summary of the workshop number 1, which we went over, but this will be done by our consultants. And then also they'll be presenting what we're calling draft concept alternatives and renderings, but it's just to get the minds flowing as far as like, what could that look like? And again, it's focused on example sites and kind of thinking about how, you know, you would cite something on that site and then how that looks again along the corridor, where development, we really should not have future development, or where better sites are for future development. So it's going to be a hands-on exercise with a 3-dimensional site plan of 2 different sites along the corridor, and then different pieces that you can move on the site. It should be interesting to participate in that workshop. So here's the information about it. And like I said, the notice did go out, and then I'll have this link up on our webpage as well.
Jennifer, how do you envision this group kind of engaging in this? Are we just coming to the workshop and participating like all the other residents? Do you want us to kind of be ambassadors, if you will? How do you envision us participating? Because I think this group really wants to be involved in this and take a hands-on approach.
I think it would be beneficial if you all did participate in all of the public community workshops, and then that way you are participating in the exact same surveys or other information that they are, and you're hearing from them as well at the workshop and participating with them. Like I said, we will do another meeting after with the findings from that workshop to the task force, and then get feedback from you all at that time. So I think that's why it's helpful if you guys actually participate as well during that workshop component. It gives you a little bit more information that maybe you hear on the side that maybe we don't hear when we're leading discussion.
Good point. But I also think it would be cool to kind of find ways for us to be actively engaged. And so that there's a passive side, but then there's an active side where people are, at least this task force is actively engaged with the residents and actively listening and actively participating in the exercises, and even leading some of the exercises would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions or thoughts? Susan?
I really love the idea of 3D areas of the workshop too, and letting people like get their hands on the building blocks, if you will, so that they can participate in that. I mean, in my mind, it would be really easy for us to, at the one end of the corridor, to start sort of stepping up with housing blocks sort of that support a green space above, and that the bikes and the pedestrian path would be connected on rooftops over these incremental tiny homes sort of, but blocks of tiny homes settlement. And I would love to see something like that. It's one of the 3D possibilities that people can get their hands on, moving these building blocks that support a green space above, going down the length of the corridor.
Thank you, Susan. Chris?
Yeah, I just one observation that I don't know how to deal with this. The conversation where the notion of the relationship between this city and other cities is founded is important, because the idea of people are concerned about pass-through traffic, but we are part of an ecosystem that includes Carlsbad and San Marcos that are our neighbors, but we all, at least I think many of us, look to services and uses in those cities, and we are one larger community. We're not an isolated island all by ourselves. And there are very few linkages other than El Camino Real, and if you go to the coast, and the coast doesn't get you anywhere except to a limited portion of access. So it's really, El Camino Real is like the the arterial that allows for our communities to relate to one another. And I would be concerned if the outcome of this plan is one in which we try to go so far as to essentially isolate ourselves, just because it is the corridor. Sure, it's the corridor that people get back and forth, and that there's a reason for that. It's all we've got. Anyway, just an observation.
I think it's a good observation. Certainly from my perspective, there's a balance between trying to have a corridor where people feel like they can kind of gather and socialize and feel safe to walk on the sidewalks or ride their bikes down the road. I think we've done a lot already, and we've achieved, well, with the level of traffic out there too, we've achieved kind of a target speed throughout most of the corridor of 35 miles per hour. There's on the, I'm sure Ron would say on the southern portion, on the northern portions, we have it creeping up above that. But I think it's about how do we balance, all of the competing interests, and I think that is certainly a use of this corridor, which is a linkage, and I wouldn't want to in any way damage that, eviscerate it, because I think it's important. But it's also important that we're enhancing the corridor for the residents that kind of live there and the people that visit the area, to ensure that they really feel at home, and then it's a part of their community, and they can embrace it as well. George?
Yeah, I was wondering if in any of the upcoming workshops, there's, or at what stage, input or involvement from like safety and law enforcement, because we are talking about the usage of the roads too. That seems like an important component, and whether they're participating in this task force in some fashion or at some point after they provide their input.
So we do have, Jennifer, you can help me out with this. We do have Michael von Neumann, who is the chair of the Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission. So we have that aspect. And then I would say, Jennifer, how do we include our sheriff's department in this planning in terms of, I mean, one aspect would be I know Michael and I found ourselves on the different side of the discussion here, but for instance, as we got rid of some of the red light cameras, what are we doing to ensure that we don't have rear end collisions because people are trying to make it across the intersection, take a left and make it across the intersection before the light turns red. And so what are we doing from an engineering perspective to enhance that? I think that that's one element, but there is certainly a space here for law enforcement to come in and help us out in terms of policy perspective and planning in the corridor. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Jennifer, do you have any comments on that?
Just wanted to add that a couple of things. One is, we would definitely involve the sheriff's department. They are the ones that are going to provide us most of the data on traffic collisions and other issues along the corridor. And then as far as response time, that's also sheriff and fire, which also whenever we do any kind of review of the future corridor or traffic impacts and things like that, we're always going to do a bunch of studies. We're going to look at traffic impacts and safety and all those different things under our Environmental Quality Act here in the city. I will say we are doing multiple projects right now that are kind of becoming in line, and we're trying to get them better in line. And that includes, as Deputy Mayor Mosca commented, the circulation/mobility element that is underway right now that is looking at circulation throughout the entire city. So anything that is done on El Camino obviously would impact other roads. So if there's any change within that, it's going to impact other roads. So it's a good timing for these two projects to happen together, so that whole circulation network can be looked at. And so that is the plan, is to look at the corridor, but as well as the whole network. So that is in place, and we are working towards that. The other project that we're currently working on, actually two, City Council adopted the Vision Zero and gave us direction on moving forward with Vision Zero, which is the goal of having 0 fatalities or major pedestrian conflict collisions. That has a set of actions that we're going to do. And then also our active transportation implementation plan is underway as well. And so looking at the corridor and routes into the corridor. So all those projects combine in together. So I did want to make note of that, and you guys will be learning more about those studies as they occur, as we kind of narrow down on alternatives, because we do need to look at alternatives. So we may have a preferred alternative, but we do need to look at other alternatives as part of our environmental review, and so what those impacts are for traffic, congestion, GHG, everything you can imagine.
Awesome. Byron?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So great discussion. I think I wanted to jump in and offer some perspective from kind of the retail shopping center audience, and actually reach out to the attendees. Look like there are 19 or 20 attendees at the meeting tonight, and anybody else in the public who's going to watch this meeting later on. I think it'd be important for the task force to hear from the community. And so I'm asking the community to think about, in the intervening time between now and the time we get together again and at the workshop, is what does the retail experience look like for Encinitas residents and business owners in the future, given that from our perspective, as we operate retail centers up and down California, we're noticing, and Encinitas is no different, that most communities now are kind of over retailed, particularly from a soft goods standpoint. The selling of soft goods or incidentals that people go to their neighborhood shopping center for, apart from an anchor-based grocer or a larger retailer like a Target, and are shifting more towards experiential type retail uses, food and beverage, personal services, instructor-based uses, Pilates, yoga, those kinds of things. And so it would be important for us, as the owners of Camino Village, Plaza and Encinitas Village, and from my perspective as part of this task force, I think important for the task force to hear is, have the community think about, well, given what's happening with retail and the shift that's going on, what does a retail center for me look like in 10 years? What does it look like in 15 years? And how do I get to it? And if I recognize that, well, maybe, these big retail centers that have too much retail space now, maybe those might be good spots for housing. What does that housing look like? How tall is it? How big is it? How do the residents move around from those? I'm listening about Susan, and I think Don talked about traffic, and certainly a valid concern. But if we take some of these larger centers and make them into small communities where you have, different types of housing, higher density, but all those people, but you have residents serving retail uses in the centers. What do people think about that idea? And I would be very interested in hearing community input on kind of the retail center or the mixed use community center of the future for Encinitas as we go forward. So I appreciate the time. Deputy
Byron,
Mayor, thank you.
Byron, thank you so much, and so happy to have your perspective on this group. Really am, and I think that obviously is your experience, because I've seen the evolution and changes of some of your properties, and what you've said is how some of your properties have been guided too. So thank you for bringing this to our discussion. And I do think that hopefully, I see Sherry Yardley here too from our chamber. I'm hoping that we're going to have this kind of discussion too about the future retail and future of commercial businesses along the corridor, and how potentially, some of the residential could be compatible, helpful uses to not only the commercial side of it, but also to the city, as we're looking at some affordable housing and where affordable housing can go. We're better than on commercial corridors. as opposed to on some of the more rural areas of the city. And so definitely want to talk about that. And you see kind of like even on the southern portion, Byron, toward your area, where it's already kind of naturally, organically, well, I say organically, I'm sure that you guys have done a lot of thought about this and thinking about this, but it appears to kind of organically be happening. Whereas opposed to on the northern portions, we still have these kind of big boxes. And, you know, the sporting goods place, Dick's, is, you know, I think the second or third iteration there. And some of these places are quite large. I think we're having Burlington Coat Factory come in where the old movie theater used to be in the mid part there. And so there's certainly kind of changes happening, and us thinking about 10, 15, 20 years or even further into the future is so important. Jennifer, how long is this time planning for? I know we don't update our specific plans all that often, but you know, how long is this planning period for? Are we looking 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years into the future?
Yes, we are looking probably closer to the 30-year mark.
All right. All right, I see Susan's hand up.
Yes, you know, I think both the prior gentleman who spoke and what you said really point to the strength of flexible zoning, because we don't really know, you know, we need to know 30, 40 years in the future, but we don't know. So the best thing we can do probably is to recommend something that's flexible, to try to keep everyone happy. If you give flexibility in zoning, you're not approving a specific project with zoning. Zoning is just zoning, it's not projects. But it does give the ability for future projects to be diverse, and it allows for long range, I think. So that was, and I really liked what the guy said before you about, I'm sorry, I didn't catch his name, Deputy Mosca. What was
Byron.
Deputy Mayor Mosca?
Are
Yes,
you saying
yes,
Byron?
yes. I
okay.
love
Even my wife
his
forgets my
comments
names.
about long range thinking. Yes, long range thinking, really great.
All right, Sherry, did you have any, or George, you guys have anything to?
No, I'm just listening, just absorbing it all right now.
Perfect. All right, so that was it for this portion workshop agenda item. Did before we go to public comment, did anybody want to comment on anything else? Or Jennifer, I don't see on the agenda future items. Did you have a plan in terms of how we're going to tackle it in the future, or do we want to kind of open it up to what this task force wants to hear in the future?
If you would like to do that and open it up, and then, like I said, I don't know yet when the next meeting date. We will not have a regular scheduled meeting time. It'll be on the as needed basis, but I will give as much notice as possible. So I probably will schedule the July meeting now. My goal is always to give 30 days to kind of get it on calendars and things, but just wanted to throw that out there. But if there's something specific that you want to go over that we've looked at previously, but like I said, definitely on the next agenda item will be the summary of workshop 2, the findings of that, and to discuss those land use / design alternatives.
All right, well, let's do this. Let's go to any comment that you guys have or questions that you have on any item on the agenda. And then what we'll do is go to public comment, and then we'll wrap it up maybe with just some closing comments and future items that you all may want to kind of talk about. And I'm open to whatever process you guys want to take. You know, we can meet more frequently. We can break into subgroups if there are additional things that we want to talk about. George?
Yeah, that's what my question was. Looking forward, what is the plan? Are we planning to try to convene once a month, or to create any subcommittees? And just was curious of what the thought was with the group or yourself or Jennifer.
So it sounds like we're going to come back in July.
So after that, and I did hear that. I guess I'm looking more like what planning the coming months is if this is going to be something we should be meeting regularly for or not.
I'm open because I think we have to, I think our goal would be to review a lot of the stuff that's been put together in terms of the goals, the objectives and the vision. And so even potentially, breaking up into smaller groups and then coming back and presenting what we've done, or we can kind of do it as one large group. I'm open to whatever your suggestions are.
I like that idea, and I do like the idea of having the opportunity to work in smaller groups to kind of get a better idea, from people that have more opportunity to express concepts or ideas, things that we're hearing.
Susan? Did you have your hand up before and not put it down, or are you wanting to speak again?
I still didn't get a response about the budget question, what the city's budget is for their proposed infrastructure projects. Are they waiting to see if they're applying for some funding from federal funding, or, I don't know what money is coming into this to help as a city, I mean.
So I think Jennifer can answer the question, but I'm not sure. I'm not actually sure what the question is. What infrastructure are you talking about? Did you, I'm sorry, you went in and out. So what
if we're proposing things to the public in a workshop as far as zoning and changing things, is there anything we're proposing that needs money, and budget, and where would we get that? Because I know that a lot of times I have ideas that I proposed, to someone, and if there isn't money, it can't happen. And so I just would kind of like to know.
Right. All right. So right now we're just engaged in planning. And so the planning, putting this specific plan together, we've budgeted for this. And part of the cost is going to be borne by a grant that we applied for and received. In terms of if we identify future infrastructure improvements within the plan, how that's going to be paid for, well, that's something that we're going to have to plan out in the future, just like we do with all the other items, be it streetscape, be it stormwater drains, or anything that we've done on El Camino Real now. When we've identified it as a need and we kind of planned it out, we didn't know where we were going to get the money at the time, but planning is so critically important. And the money is important as well, but it will come, and we will work hard to find it. I hope that answers your question. Jennifer,
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Mosca.
You're welcome. Jennifer, feel free to add anything to that.
The other aspect of the specific plan will probably at the end of the document will include identification of funding opportunities for different implementation measures. So.
Great. All right. Any questions? Any other questions or comments? All right. So Ron, one last question, then we'll move to public comment. Jennifer, how are we conducting public comment? Do we take written comments in advance? Are we just going to call on folks?
I call on individuals. There's 3 hands,
right,
attendees that have raised their hand. So if anybody else wants to speak, they can raise their hand, and then I'll let them speak.
All right, great. Let's move to Ron, and then I'll call on you to recognize the members of the public that would like to speak. Ron?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Comment on a couple of things. What Susan's speaking about budgets, and that seems to be sort of a chronic problem, in that we come up with ideas and pursue designs and whatnot, and somewhere in the process realize that the project is more costly than we maybe imagined or gave time to think about at the beginning, and therefore didn't really plan out pursuing grants or funds from other government agencies, or how we're going to do do we do it internally within our own city budget. And I think we see that happen periodically. The other comment to Byron's comment about the shifting retail, and we're kind of seeing that in the southern end, as I think you, Deputy Mayor, pointed out. that we're seeing more destination types of amenities coming into place, restaurants, outdoor gathering places with restaurants. A couple on the east side are coming together. I think that like 3 new restaurant marketplace types of facilities there between L'Atelier and Chipotle and Mendocino Farms. And those are the kinds of things that I think we're headed toward, these destinations where people go for sort of a complete experience as opposed to going in to pick up a ream of paper. But we're gonna still need to pick up that ream of paper somewhere. So I don't have all the answers, but just an observation there. Thank you.
Good observations. Thank you, Ron. Jennifer? Jennifer, you're on mute, so we didn't hear your amazing words.
Okay, sorry about that. So we do have 4 speakers right now. Did you want me to time it?
Please.
Okay, let me get my timer ready. And so you would like 3 minutes per speaker?
3 minutes is, yeah, 3 minutes is good.
Okay. All right, so the first speaker will be Bruce Ehlers, and
There, can you hear me?
we can.
Perfect. So I've got a couple different comments. I'll be brief if I can. First, I appreciate this being publicly done and recorded. I think that's great. I'd also like to thank Michael von Neumann for his comment about a statistically valid survey. I think that's right on. And also, Ron, thank you for bringing up Prop A. This absolutely will trigger a major amendment to our planning documents. It will change zoning. Therefore, it must trigger a Prop A vote. Of course, if it fails the Prop A vote, then a lot of the work will have wasted. So I like to, we talk about statistically valid surveys. I always think there's none better than a vote of the people. If we all remember back to Home Depot, it was a huge controversy within the city. But once we had the vote of the people, it died down immediately. We built the Home Depot. And I always point out that 75% of that property resulted in being preserved in its natural state. That would not have happened without that high hurdle of requiring some public benefit that the public recognized, and they did. So I look forward to the Prop A discussion and vote on this. On the process we're engaged in right now with this committee, I would ask the committee to consider, how does this current process differ from the 2010 to about 2012 GPAC and ERAC committees that looked at densifying the corridor along El Camino Real? First of all, I'd point to the makeup of those committees. They had very few, and I'm glad we added 2 residents. Quite frankly, I think it should be 20 residents, along with other business owners, developers. So, but ultimately, it's the residents that will be voting on this. So we need to make sure there's a public benefit, a very strong perceived public benefit in what is being proposed. And if you look back at what happened to those, they got thrown out. The GPAC got thrown out by I think it was Mayor Stocks at the time, and the council majority. So let's make sure we keep the people front and center, and what is in it for them. Jennifer, a little feedback on the timeline. I would like to see a Prop A vote in there because I didn't see it. It went to City Council, then went to Coastal Commission. Presumably it would go to a Prop A vote first. Second item is connections or interconnections. This has been near and dear to my heart for a long time. I've been on the Planning Commission twice. Back in my first time there, I fought unsuccessfully to get a connection between the AMC theaters and Vons when one of them was redeveloping. And it would have been an ideal position to have one. Later, I think in that same time, back in 2004 or so, I was successful in getting connection between the 777 building, the medical building, and the cancer center, cancer medical center. And that made it so you could actually cut through and get out of there, which, by the way, there is already a general plan policy that asks for and requires this on our developments. Yet, unless you have 2 cooperating neighboring landowners, it's very difficult to get. So I caution you, I love the idea. I would tell you it's already in there. I don't know what you're going to do differently, but I look forward to hearing it. So, and then finally, my last question is kind of along what Susan Sherrod said okay, I'm almost done. The public infrastructure costs. My view, the public advantage is to make this more tree lined, kind of like 101 used to be through Leucadia, make it more green. And I think the trees in the median over the last 30 years have been a huge improvement. Let's do more like that. And I think that will help sell it with the people. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. And I know that when we did the walkabout with Dan Burton, that we talked about how do we put in our code and encourage when there are changes to some of the properties along the corridor, how can we pull that treescape from the kind of inner part of the sidewalk to the outer part so that you actually create that kind of tree lines street and even kind of buffer people from the cars so that it feels a little bit more comfortable for people to walk down that corridor. So I do think that those are things that we should be thinking about. Yeah.
There's an interesting aside. I had met years and years ago, 30 years ago, the architect of the Ralph Center, which I think, Byron, that's yours. Do you know why there's a gap between CVS and what used to be Vista Paint? That was envisioned back under county as being a frontage road running through there. And it was the architect that told me about it. You know, obviously that vision got lost somewhere back in county days. Unfortunately, it sounds like it's kind of the thing we're talking about here is if only we had an interconnection parking lot to parking lot kind of along that theme. So
I think that's another brilliant comment. I think we should be thinking about that. And that one idea right there could potentially close down a couple of driveways. I mean, as Byron, I think you did a good job in narrowing that driveway. I think that's actually a good planning tool is if we're not eliminating the driveways, at least narrow them so that they don't seem so hard to traverse by a resident or a biker. But I think what Bruce just said in terms of that connectivity right in that space right there is one creative idea in terms of knocking out a couple of driveways. So that could be something that happens in the future. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
All right, next is JK.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, it's Geraldine, and I think this is just amazing what you people are doing on this. This is like one of the best workshops I've been since I've been paying attention to what's going on in the community. And it's just great. Everybody on board is just doing a great thing. I just wanted to say just a couple of things. I didn't write down anything, so I'm just trying to wing it here, and I'll do my best to stay on target. First of all, I would love it if you could get more of this people involved. I mean, I send out emails to my street on Witham, but I really don't think that people are aware of this process that's going on. And I know you did that flashing light on El Camino to talk about it, but this is real important because it's going to impact me directly because my view is of the mountains and LA Fitness right now. And my neighborhood will all be impacted directly. And I don't want it to be like Delmar Heights Road. Okay, that's a nightmare and it's just congested. I can't even stand going over there. So that's just my 2 cents. And I just wanted to point out that Encinitas Boulevard is very dangerous. That BMW dealership is going to be going, and they say that there is going to be the Tesla place is going to be going in there, is what I heard from them. But those people that are parking in the center, that's illegal. And I don't know how many times I have to call and complain about it. It shouldn't be, they shouldn't be parking there. It's dangerous for those e-bikes during, it's just dangerous. And then the left-hand turns that people are still trying to make out of Sprouts, super dangerous. There should be some kind of patrol there. Yeah, that's it. Just keep up the good work and just try to maybe inform this area a little bit more. And thank you for your service.
Thank you.
All right. Next is Julie Thunder.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great. I'll be brief. I'm concerned about the homes that align El Camino Real. There's hundreds, if not thousands of homes in the 3.5 mile stretch that sit behind or near the commercial properties that go up and down El Camino Real. Those homes bought their properties with a certain expectation. And I would just like to see a much more deliberate outreach to those homeowners. And I'd like to see a lot more of them on the calls and at the community meetings. I'm grateful for what you guys are doing. I think you're, I think you're making some great points tonight. I think some are very lofty and some are very realistic. And I think somewhere in the middle, you'll figure it out. But it's not reasonable to figure that out without a good contingent of the homeowners. And those are the homeowners that will shout loud and proud about their property values if you try to do something too extreme that's going to affect their property values. So that's it. I just would like to see a lot of emphasis and a lot of outreach, not the 500 feet requirement for major projects. I would like to see that go up to 1,000 or 1,500 feet, because this is a major project. I'm sorry if I said major before, I didn't mean it. This is a major project that will affect everybody in the city because we all use it. So maybe all future notifications for this specific plan update should include everybody in the city by default. So that's it. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Julie. And Julie, and everybody else that's listening, I think that one of the goals for us is really maximum outreach and building this plan from the bottom up. And I really truly believe that. And I agree with all the comments so far that that if this is going for a Prop A vote, there's certainly no way to achieve a Prop A vote, a successful one, if we don't include people, community members from the very beginning, especially those that are going to be impacted by any decision that we make. And also, if we're going to build a vision, we need to make sure that we have the community's feedback, because it's their vision that we're working toward. So if you have any ideas in terms of outreach, certainly send them over to us, because we want to hear from you. Any outreach thoughts? I mean, we have the billboards and we're doing a ton of different things, but anything that you think we could kind of reach out to folks. I did hear one idea about increasing the distance in which we notice people. That's something we can discuss, but anything else, please absolutely know that you can email me or email Jennifer Gates or anybody else that's on this task force. Thank you.
Okay, next is Glenn Johnson.
Okay, good evening, Jennifer and all, and Joe. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I've been in Encinitas for over 35 years, and one thing I notice is that El Camino Real is a very, very important road for the whole region, and we have to provide on that street some way for people to get to the freeway, even if they're coming from Carlsbad or further away. Right now, we have a funny thing that there's a circulation element being developed, and your committee is also working. And I'm wondering if you're in communication with the consultant on that circulation element at all, because there ought to be some coordination there. My own opinion is that we need to separate the through traffic from the local shopping traffic. I wish we had roads, frontage roads or something. And this is going to end up being a huge project. It's going to take a lot of money, of course. And we just need to handle the traffic as one of the prime priorities in order to allow any other use of that. Our thing right now is that we want pedestrians and bicycles to share the road. And I think you actually need separate roads for the pedestrians and bicycles. They can't share the street with all those driveways, not safely. Anyway, and my thought is that as far as looking at what you're going to want to do, if you aim low, you will definitely hit low. I think you have to think big, think about what this is going to look like in 30, 40 years when we'll have whole different modes of transportation. We ought to have right now at least a shuttle bus up and down that corridor, and we don't. We don't have any local transportation in Encinitas except driving, and that's really a shame. And that's about what I've got to say at this moment.
Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, we have one more speaker, and that is Garvin Walsh. Just give me 1 second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. By the way, I want to echo a comment that someone else made about how I'm very pleased to see this thing unfolding in such a professional sort of way. And I commend you for your work. I know it's a lot of work, and I thank you for your time and hope to hear more from you. Jennifer, can you clarify one point of information before I comment? Are all of the members of this committee residents of Encinitas?
No, that was not a requirement from the council.
Okay. And so let me speak to Mr. Diarakal's comments. I was very interested in his remarks about the evolution of retailing, and he's described it well, and I'm sure we all know what the drivers behind that are. But as I heard him, he was talking about a shift from particularly from the soft goods toward more services, and then he talked about the combination in these locations of retail and residential, which would amount to an intensification of the use of those locations. And it all makes sense as an evolution or a strategy of migration. But I wonder whether, because Byron represents two property owners, very large property owners in this subject area, whether it's appropriate for him to be on the task force itself. As I already said, I think his comments were fascinating, and I believe his opinion and his input should be gathered. But when it comes time to formulating a recommendation, I wonder if he should be a part of the task force, because it strikes me as though there's a conflict of interest between the interests of his employer or partner or whatever the status is, and the interests of the community, of which he's not a part. And none of this is intended to criticize Byron, because as he said, I think he said good things. But when it comes time to sort of weighing the evidence at a point down the road, I'm wondering if he would be subject to the kinds of influences that would amount to a conflict of interest. And I'd ask you as a committee and as a staffer to investigate that question before proceeding further.
Thank you, Garvin, for your comments. I think that it's appropriate for Byron to be on this task force. I think that when we look to the past and we looked at opportunities and moments when we tried to plan for this corridor, it wasn't always bringing all parties together. And I think that the task here is to really kind of bring everybody that has an interest in this corridor together: the property owners, the business associations, the residents that use this corridor, the visitors, the people that track through the corridor, everybody that has an interest in this corridor. It's important to bring everybody together because again, just in the same vein of, I think the comment about Prop A was a good one in that we should make sure that we have that in the timeline because it reminds us that this is going to a vote and that we should be, and we already know we want to make sure that we're building that vision from the ground up, but it's just reinforces the idea that we really need to make sure that we're getting as much feedback as possible. But in that same vein, we need to make sure that we're bringing in all the folks that have an interest in this corridor, legal or otherwise, because it's important to make sure that if there's going to be a solution and a vision that comes out of this process, it's going to be one in which everybody has buy-in into. And my hope is that we really do have a consensus and a vision at the end of this process that really does encapsulate the vision for the corridor with maximum buy-in from all stakeholders, including residents, business owners, property owners, everybody that uses this corridor. So thank you so much, Garvin. Do we have? Thank you, Garvin. Jennifer, did we have any other public comment? Jennifer, you're muted.
I saw. There is one more. Mitch Felipe or Philippe.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to say that I think it's very important to have the commercial property owners and people that are experts in the development world as part of this committee. They know better than anyone what works and what doesn't work economically, what is feasible and what isn't. And I would hope that the professional planners and designers that are working on this specific plan are consulting with people such as the retail owners. If they don't, then the plan doesn't come together in a way that really works financially and economically. I think the development world is looked upon in a very negative way by a lot of people in Encinitas. I don't know if that's fair or not, but I think big plans like this have to come together by utilizing the expertise of professional planners and designers, the community, experts in the retail and development world. And ultimately, it's the job of the Planning Commission and the City Council to see if all of those interests are being portrayed in a good design that will work and can be funded and is good for the community and good for the business community. So one of the things that always seems to happen, and other people commenting have said this, is that plans get done and then people get all bent out of shape about them. They may or may not have participated in the process, but certainly when things come to a vote, as someone previously said, the truth comes out. The public votes and the majority should rule. So I hope we will continue to remain very transparent, because that's very important, I think, to the people in Encinitas. People here don't like to be hoodwinked. They don't like to think that statistics are being manipulated and not really put out there. So I applaud the work so far for being very transparent, and I look forward to workshop number 2. I would imagine that the professional planners and designers working on this are going to come up with some very good ideas. There are wonderful, wonderful places being developed in Southern California and throughout the world that do exactly what people have talked about. They bring gathering spaces, they bring pedestrian and bicycle circulation into the forefront. They look to the future and design a community benefit that can be used, 30, 40, 50 years from now. So I look forward to workshop number 2, and thanks everybody for your participation.
Thank you, Mitch, for your public comment. I hope you will participate in more of our meetings. I look forward to your comments in the future. Any other public comments?
I do not
Going
see any
once?
more.
Going once, going twice, raise your hand if you have any public comments. All right, let's close public comment. Let's bring it back to our task force. And I mean, I think there are a couple different items that I heard. One is Glenn had talked about the circulation element, and I think that's important, or the mobility element, or whatever we're calling it. But I think that's an important discussion for us. And I wonder at some point if we can have a discussion on that, how what we're doing interacts with that. The other thing too that I think is critically important is the outreach. And I'd love to have more of a discussion about what outreach we're doing. I agree about Prop A. I think that we should have that in our timeline, just so that it again, we know that outreach is important, but it also basically ensures that we're setting the tone. We're focused in a way that we know that what we're doing has to meet the scrutiny of the electorate. The review and comment on the vision, the goals, and the objectives, just kind of trying to understand how we're going to do that. Do we want to do that as a group? Do we want to break that up into different elements and do it and then come back? I think that would be good. I know that I did want to throw out that there's shuttle bus. I've always been a big believer of all of this parking on El Camino Real. Managing the parking throughout our city could be done so much more efficiently. And how can a shuttle not only help folks that are using the corridor and residents that are using the corridor, but how can the shuttle help other parts of the city? As we see that there's a lack of parking in our downtown or anywhere else, perhaps there's a shuttle that can move people from one side to the other and not impact the residents on the west side or impact the residents on the east side. Anyways, I'd be interested in hearing comments from my colleagues here. Susan?
I do think that separating the local and through traffic comment that was made by one of the speakers, I want to comment that is a principle that we always look at in good design. And I really hope that those who are working on the actual design are going to do that. Separating the pedestrians, bikes, and cars would be the easiest way to guarantee safety. And I think the city can do it. And I think they can sell it to Prop A vote. The reason why is that we all want safety. I don't think there's anyone who would say, oh no, we can't have safety. I don't really think we're going to hear that. So I think safety and in the design and keeping green will really be the reasons why we would see a Prop A vote. And I agreed with Julie Thunder about saying that we need a little wider than 500-foot noticing for outreach. When you think about outreach traditionally, you think about mailing flyers or something like this, but when you get a notice, from the city that there's something going to happen, you really take notice of that mail, and so I think a broader noticing is a form of outreach, and that particular point, I think.
I'm sorry, Susan, are you done, or did your mute button just?
Yes, that was most of what I had.
All right, perfect.
I think
Byron?
everything else,
I'm sorry.
I already said in terms about flexible zoning being.
All right. Byron?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to agree with the talk about mobility and circulation, but I failed to disclose up front that I chair the Planning Commission in the city where I live in Costa Mesa. And when we look, we're actually thinking about doing specific plans for a portion of our major corridor through the city, which is Harbor Boulevard. Those elements like circulation are very, very important that I'm sure this task force will have a lot of input on. There's so many things that are going to go into this whole specific plan process, Jennifer will educate us and tell us along the way, from looking at a slew of the various elements in your general plan to then updating your zoning to looking at design standards. So I think it's really a comprehensive approach, and that's why I'm sensitive to Mr. Walsh's comments, but I think a comprehensive approach. I'm a part of the business community in Encinitas. I'm not a resident, but there's a business community, there's the resident community. So it's a big community made up of micro communities or smaller communities. I think we all have various stakes in the city, and I think this process is very important. I think more community input and outreach, the better. That's always been my experience. I just want to echo what I think Susan said about, and I reiterated this or brought it up in the developers workshop. From our perspective, and I think most of the commercial property owners in the city articulated the same thing, it's far better to preserve flexibility on a parcel than to change the underlying zoning from whatever general commercial to mixed use or whatever it is, or residential. So we're very much in favor of overlay zones where you preserve the underlying zoning. You have an overlay zone. If the property owner chooses to exercise it, or the market, kind of drives the use of that land in one way or the other, that's better than changing the underlying zoning and then having to come back and change it if you miss the market or the market's not responding to that underlying zone. So I like I said, Deputy Mayor, I really appreciate being part of this committee. I appreciate all the members here, in particular the residents. I understand this is the town they live in 24/7. So, we want to be good neighbors. We want to provide shopping centers, experiential centers, destination centers that, that they want to come to and where they dine and shop and maybe even live. And so that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Byron. Any other comments? Ron, and we can shift to also, if you want to include your comments, any kind of future items that you want to hear. I think I already named a few.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A couple things about notifying the city or notifying members of the city. I mentioned earlier on that I didn't receive an email to notify me because I signed up for the email list and I did not get an email for the developers roundtable. And I'd recommend to anybody who's listening to this to go listen to that audio tape. It's interesting and informative. And we couldn't have this meeting without members of what we're calling the developers, the commercial property owners or managers. We couldn't do this. We'd be talking in the dark. So I don't see that as an issue. Also, there seems to be more than one calendar for the city. There's the main calendar on the front page calendar link, the blocks, but it seems that there's a calendar for the I'll get the name of the organization incorrect. Sustainment and development. What was the name of your organization, Jennifer? I apologize.
You're talking about our department at
Yes.
the city?
Yes.
We're the Development Services Department.
Development Services. Okay. Development Services has a calendar in their website, and it turns out that on that calendar, the developers workshop is listed and does exist. And I hate to make it, and I don't want to make a big deal out of this. Actually, I kind of do, because people need to know and know reliably about what's going on. I ended up actually double signing up for the email notices from for the specific plan as a result of that. I think those are my comments for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Michael? Michael, you're on mute.
No, that's better now. I want to thank everybody from the community that came in with their comments and all. And I think the more public awareness, public input, the better for everything. I do want to kind of circle back to one of my initial comments at the beginning of the meeting about a big challenge of this is that ECR, El Camino Real, is used as a commuter. Yes, I understand that, and you can't do anything to stop that. But then we also have to make sure that it doesn't become a divisive and a division or a means of division between our communities. A lot of urban areas throughout the country are dealing with that fact that freeways have separated communities, broken up communities. And in some areas, they're actually tearing down freeways. So perhaps I should say, I would like to see El Camino Real not be a freeway type of road. I like Glenn Johnson's comment about making a separate road for people who want to go shopping and a separate road or means of conveyance for people who are just going through town to get to the freeway or something like that. So, but again, thank you to all the public and fellow task force members. And I personally don't like the idea of breaking down into smaller groups. This is a small enough group right now that I think we can continue forward with this size group rather than breaking it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And certainly from a transparency point of view, it probably makes sense for us to just stay together as a group so that all of these meetings are noticed and everybody has an opportunity to attend the meeting as well. So Byron, I see your hands back up. Did you have a further comment? No. All right. Michael, you're done. No other comment. Ron, did you have another comment? Did your hand?
Yes, please.
Sure, I did.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, once again. Just a quick comment. We were talking about the mobility plan, playing with the specific plan, playing with the circulation plan, with every other plan that's impacting our city. And I like to sort of socialize the idea of thinking about things in terms of a system of systems. Our city is a system of systems. The specific plan, the circulation plan, all these plans and all these elements all play together. And we oftentimes think of them as they're in their own silo and miss how they're going to play with the rest of the elements in our city, in our world. So I come from an environment where systems of systems is a pretty common thing. So I thought I'd pass that along.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Susan, did you say you also had a comment?
Yeah, I did forget to mention that I agree with yourself, Deputy Mayor Mosca, and Byron, being that all parties need to have input, including the commercial property owners and businesses, whether they're leasing or owning a building on that commercial strip. And I think that really we have to think big. If I just were to have 2 words about this project, it would be think big.
All right. Well, we'll think big and also practical, but big is important. All right, so if there are no other comments, Jennifer, I think we got a lot of feedback. Did you want to go back and forth on the next agenda and just kind of work out what our next agenda would be?
We can do that. And like I said, it'll be July, and just to give everybody a heads up, since there's not a lot of people, but hopefully a lot of people will watch this, is if you are interested in getting updates, there was a link, and it is a link on the webpage as well, that you can sign up for the updates on the project. And we would send out information. We sent out information about the task force meeting. And then on Friday, everybody should have received as well the workshop coming up on June 20th. And we'll send out additional reminders of that. And then any of the other projects as well have the same process. And so the mobility element also will be having a workshop in July. And so what I'm hoping is that you guys would all participate as well in the July mobility element workshop update, which is actually going to identify road network and also what the road classification proposals are which will include El Camino Real. And then my plan is to have a meeting after that meeting so that we can make sure that we include all of that in our discussion. So it'll be the end of July. So I wanted to just give you a heads up about that. The other aspect of constant contact, if you are in constant contact and you decide that you do not want to receive updates anymore, you are actually out of the entire system. It's not just for that one project. You are now out of the entire City of Encinitas email list. So just wanted to make sure people are aware of that.
All right. Could we also send out an email just reminding people of the dates for the workshop, reminding people about the date for the circulation element workshop? And then just one comment for me in terms of our July meeting. The city council is dark for July, and if we can kind of move it to the end of July, that would be great.
It'll be the end.
All right, awesome.
The very last week, right before everybody comes back.
Yeah, because the kids are, we have lots of camps and planning things going on, and I mean that's the entire community, right? Summertime is a great time to be out and about in Encinitas and all about, so all over the place. So, anyways, any other comments before we end this meeting? Right on time at 6 p.m.
Oh, thank you.
All right, great. Thank you guys so much for participating, and look forward to working with you guys on this project. It's very important. And really extremely pleased that we're all able to work together on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep.